Well, it's that time again. Welcome back to the Racing Writers Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Crandall, and happy race week! We have made it through the off-season, so shut down the old YouTube videos, put away the board games, the cell phone games, anything, the books, magazines, everything that you've been doing to pass the time this off-season. We have made it to the end. We are going racing this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. We've got the Clash coming up on Sunday and Daytona 500 qualifying, which gives way to a busy week next week ahead of the 60th annual Daytona 500. So we made it. Everybody take a deep breath, pat yourself on the back. You've made it through another off season. And we've made it to another podcast. My guest this week is Matt Tifft. He is the new driver at RCR Racing. He's going to pilot the number 2 Chevrolet this year. And as you will hear me say very early in this podcast, one of the reasons I want to sit down with Matt is because I think a lot of us know Matt Tifft, the race car driver. We've heard, how he's come from Hinckley, Ohio to become one of the young stars in the sport. Of course, over the last 2 years, we've heard a lot about how he's come back from a brain tumor that, sat him out of the car for quite a while he was driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. But there's more to Matt Tifft than just being a race car driver. And so as a younger driver, as a young guy in the sport, I wanted to get to know who is Matt Tifft, or as my colleague at Racer.com, Marshall Pruitt, does a podcast, and one of his podcasts he titles them, Who the Hell Are You? And then whoever his guest is, and I always get a chuckle out of that. So in no way am I ripping off Marshall, but in this instance, I kind of took that theory of trying to get to know this young driver and sat down with Matt Tifft earlier this week at Richard Childress Racing. And I have to apologize, because if it seems like I'm out of breath and I'm over here kind of huffing on the microphone, it never fails that right before we go to Daytona, I always come down with that last preseason illness. So I never get sick after Homestead. I don't get sick during the holidays. It's always right before I leave for Daytona. So I have been taking everything in the medicine cabinet to get ready for this weekend so I can go down and enjoy the warmer weather than what we have here in North Carolina. In fact, as I record this, look out the window. It is cloudy and raining pretty good. So I'm looking forward to getting out of here. I mean, who doesn't look forward to Daytona? I mean, let's be honest. As I say this a lot, but there could be worse places to be for 10 days or so than Daytona Beach, Florida. Anyway, Matt Tifft is a guest this week. I think you're really going to enjoy this podcast because there was a lot of laughs, a lot of funny stories from Matt's childhood, how he got into racing. One of the funniest things to me, and I think you guys will enjoy too, is, when he wanted to get into racing, he had to write his mom a proposal as to why he should be allowed to race. And I got a kick out of that. As you'll hear Matt discuss, he comes from a business family. So, mom just needed it, in a business form of why this was a good decision for her son to go racing. But there's plenty of other stories in here. Of course, Matt did not come from a racing family, but he has plenty of memories of enjoying racing as a kid when he was growing up. His dad, you'll hear him say, flies to just about every race that he competes in. He flies from Cleveland, Ohio, so he's got probably a lot of frequent flyer miles. I hope he gets some vacations out of that. Housekeeping notes. Continue to rate and review on iTunes. I see that some of you just this week sent me some messages saying that they were subscribing to the podcast. I really appreciate that. And here's what I want to do. If you guys go on there and leave a rating, which I hope you're doing, I hope it's 5 stars. Don't be like me and mess it up and, twiddle around on there and suddenly hit the 1-star button. But whatever it is, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, I hope it's 5. But if you guys leave a rating, and certainly if you go in there and leave a review, I want you to take a screenshot of it and send it to me so I can see it. And I may be able to hook you guys up with maybe some prizes. I've got a lot of stuff that I've collected over the years from, giveaways and swag and just different things that teams and companies have given out. And I started putting a pile together. And I think that what I'm going to do is, if you guys start sending me screenshots of your reviews to show me that you are indeed listening, you are indeed plugged into the podcast and are enjoying the podcast, I can ship some of this stuff and get it out of my office and get it out from sitting under my desk or wherever it may be here and let you guys enjoy it. So that's something new I want to start, so please go ahead and do that. And again, welcome to the 2018 season. We've made it. It's here. We're going racing this week in Daytona. So I'm going to stop rambling because I'm out of breath already. This cold is kicking my butt. So Matt Tifft is the guest on this week's podcast. I really, really enjoyed it. I honestly did. It was one of the most fun and probably funniest interviews I have ever done. I appreciate everybody at RCR for letting me come up on a Monday and spend some time with Matt. I got to see a lot of great people before we kick off the season. Everybody's ready to go. So let's get to the show without any further ado. Here is Matt Tifft on his first ever podcast. Here's Matt Tifft. That's amazing.
Yeah.
First one?
First one ever. I mean, I've listened to them, but first one.
Is it just because you haven't been asked or you've never found one you've wanted to do?
I guess maybe a little bit of both. Yeah. I just never really... Yeah, I mean, normally I guess I've just done so many traditional interviews. I've just never done podcasts.
That's interesting.
But, yeah.
Well, I think in racing, obviously there's Nate Ryan's, which I always listen to. He does a really good job with his. And then I know there's mine, but I don't think NASCAR specific, I don't think there's any other ones out there.
I know a few drivers have them, but...
Yeah, Blaney.
Well, yeah, I'm talking
but you like media-wise.
Media-wise, I know there's a bunch of drivers, and Blaney's was interesting because I didn't even know he had one, and then all of a sudden it became like this whole big popular thing.
I haven't listened to it yet. Maybe that's bad. I don't know.
It's interesting. It's very, because it's not all racing-centric.
Yeah.
So it's more of, it's a little bit of racing, entertainment. All right, well, I'm honored then.
Yeah.
So hopefully this, I don't know if you have any expectations then.
I don't, no.
All right, so in other words, when this is done, it'll be the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely,
because you don't know how to rate it otherwise.
That's right.
I appreciate it, Matt.
It'll be the best one and the worst one I've ever done.
Yes! I'll take it.
Until we move to the next one, but
yes.
No, it'll be good.
I'll take it. How's your off season? How's it been?
It's been good. It's been busy. I guess when you move a whole organization and stuff, it's a lot of new people to learn. The biggest thing is just you have to learn not only the people but the culture and how things work, when you have meetings, when you don't, when you do things with the team, and we haven't even gotten to the first week yet. So beyond that, it's been exciting because it's a fresh start. It's been an awesome new kind of a family feel here, and just been, I don't know, it's been really refreshing in a way that I didn't completely expect it to be, but in a really good way in that form too. Yeah,
refreshing, I like that word. Is that, every driver I feel like needs that every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you're young, but even still it has to feel good to have something going into a new year that it's refreshing, it's recharging.
Sure, I mean, I think the thing for me is, stepping into RCR, I feel like I'm so much more, I'm still only 21 years old, but I feel like I'm so much more experienced than the 18 or 19-year-old was when I first got into Xfinity. That's the biggest thing, or however old it was. I don't know exactly how old, but, a couple of years in this deal makes a big difference. And so I feel like I'm at a different state of my career. I feel like I understand the business of racing a lot more. I feel like I understand expectations of me and what I have to do, and just, a week-to-week basis of things I need to keep track of or do better. Last year was a huge learning year for me for that, and it took a little while for it to click, but I feel like I have a much better sense of that now.
What do you mean by it took a little while to click? Was it...
I think just the routine of doing things and what I should be doing off the track, what I should be doing to get prepared for races, what I should be doing after the races to learn from it. And I felt like when I got to the second half of the season, I did a lot better going to the tracks. But then when we got to the playoffs, I felt like I finally learned how to be more aggressive and start attacking, and then almost had my own trial and error while doing that. So I don't have the nerves that I did last year coming into the season. So I feel like it's... I don't know. It just feels like I've done it once,
right.
And so the second time doing it, it's just not the giant unknown of not knowing what's coming up.
Okay, so I wanted to do this podcast, and the way that I pitched it to RCR was, of course you've been around a while. We know Matt Tifft, the race car driver, but who is Matt Tifft? Just Matt Tifft, the guy. So, and I know that there's probably a lot of fans out there who, of course we know you're a race car driver. We covered extensively, of course, the the brain tumor and the comeback and things like that. But I want to get to know Matt Tifft. Yeah. So I want to start with the fact that I know you're a sports guy.
Yep.
And your team was not in the Super Bowl. What did you think of the Super Bowl last night?
Sure it was. The Browns weren't in it. Yeah, I thought it was a really good game. I didn't. I was thinking in the third quarter, I was like, man, there's going to be one big defensive play. And I almost tweeted it too, but I didn't because I didn't want to make myself look like an idiot. But it's like, there's going to be one big defensive play that's going to turn this thing around. And sure enough, there was. Yeah. But yeah, I grew up.
Were you rooting for one team either way?
Well, I guess I really respect Tom Brady, so I kind of wanted to see him win, but at the same time, my cousins grew up in Philly.
Okay.
And so when I was little, we grew up going to Long Beach Island, New Jersey, which is about 5 minutes from where the Truexes are from. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of have always just liked them because my family had a big pull for them, so I was kind of more pulling for them, but so I didn't really care.
Yeah,
either way. I just wanted to see a good game, which it was.
It was a very good game. It was funny because you mentioned tweeting something, and I only tweeted one thing during the game last night, and it was the fact that we're recording this on Monday, so the game was last night, and I was chuckling because, like anybody, you love to watch the commercials, and the only thing I tweeted all of last night was that Eli Manning of the Giants, I felt like, was in more Super Bowl commercials than he has been in Super Bowls. Yeah. And apparently people just took that like I was hating on Eli or something. I just thought it was funny. So I see what you're saying about, you say one thing on Twitter and then it just it goes crazy.
Yeah, well, maybe they did it just because he's the only one who beat Brady before, so they wanted to throw him in the Super Bowl somehow.
Honestly, I wasn't hating on anything. I got a kick out of it because all the commercials were very, very good, but it was just, it seemed like every time we went to a commercial break, there was Eli and the Giants again.
Well, we were out to dinner just getting some wings and stuff, so I didn't get to hear all the commercials until I got back home like halfway through the third quarter, so I got to go back and watch them. But yeah, it seemed like Eli was in all of them. And then the really weird blackout part of it too, when the whole screen just went blank. That was bizarre. That would suck for whoever paid for that commercial spot.
So because I briefly saw it. I don't remember what I was doing at the time, but it was during a commercial, right? It wasn't during the game.
They just cut to break, I think, and then the break never happened, and then they just shot it back to the game.
Oh my gosh, I do remember.
But somebody paid
like
for that spot.
Can you imagine the amount of money that goes into Super Bowl commercials?
A lot.
And then it's just a black screen all across America and probably the world. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So speaking of sports, you're a Cleveland sports fan. I got to be honest, Matt. How in the world? What is it like being a Cleveland sports fan? Because besides when LeBron James came back and won a championship for the Cavaliers, what was it, last year or 2 years ago? How do you do it?
Well, let's not forget here, the Indians do have the best record in the American League for the last 5 years on average. So, yeah, go try.
See, a true Cleveland guy knows his stuff.
Yeah, no, our family's been a season ticket holder for the Indians since the late 90s, so I grew up 20 minutes from downtown Cleveland, so always a big fan. It started with the Indians, and then when I was about 7 was when LeBron came to town, so the Cavs just got really big as I kind of grew up around it, so it was fun watching them. I've seen them do really well and then be really terrible too at the same time. But then I've been a Browns fan, and I can't explain that one still.
I think that's probably the one that, whether it's you or anybody I know who's a Cleveland, I have so much respect for Cleveland Browns fans because I honestly, how do you do it?
Well, for a while there was hope, and then it just became sarcastically bad, and then it just became comical.
Yeah.
And so I guess I just never quit liking them because I was like, someday this is going to pay off, and that hasn't happened yet.
I respect the loyalty. I really do. And I'm not saying all of this because I'm laughing at anybody's pain, because I honestly don't know how. I can't imagine.
I'll put it this way. I don't know which will happen first between me receiving my 401k when I'm 65 or the Browns having a decent season. So whichever one happens first, I'm kind of curious to see. But one of the two will happen first.
Any city that can celebrate the fact that they went 0-16 and have a parade, I mean.
Well, did you ever see the layout of the parade? They made a giant zero.
So it was like a zero.
So my family was up there. Well, all my family still lives in Cleveland. It's in Hinckley, Ohio, is our town. And they said on Lake Erie. Now, Lake Erie is brutally cold in the winter, especially January, because it's fine in the winter like when it's snowing and stuff. But once it gets to January, the lake freezes over, and you just have this horrible frigid cold that comes off the lake. And they said that day the actual temperature was 0, but with wind chill it was -16, which is hilarious for no 16 party.
Once again, hats off to Cleveland for being that dedicated. And the T-shirts. Have you seen the T-shirts?
Oh, I've seen many T-shirts. Which one are you talking about?
I forget which one it is or what it says, but it celebrates. It's another T-shirt just celebrating the.
My favorite though is the jersey that they put all the cross out the names and throw the next quarterback on there.
It seems like that grows every year too.
By about 4, yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Who is your team?
I'm the Steelers fan.
Oh.
But I can't really brag because
I'm gonna sign off now.
Yeah, we were in the playoffs for
a while,
about as long as.
So it was interesting growing up in Cleveland because the Browns, that all happened in '99 and stuff when they came back. But I was 3 years old then when they came back, so I didn't remember any time when they were good. But when I was little, the Browns still had a really strong allegiance in Cleveland. And as time went on, and they just kind of sucked and they never got better, it was interesting to see because like the Giant Eagles up there and the Walmarts and all that kind of stuff, you'd have the Browns team section. And as time went on, their section got smaller and the Steelers section got larger. So now if you go to Youngstown, which is about an hour east of there, it's all Steelers stuff. You can't even find Browns stuff. If you go to Akron, it's Steelers and Bengals country. Yeah. But if you go to closer parts of Cleveland and like down into Medina, it's Browns country still. So it's really weird. But the majority is now Steelers. So it's like they don't even have a home base anymore.
It's funny you say that because it makes me think back to the first and so far only game that I've been to. I think it was way back in 2008. And I was driving out with a family friend. We were going to go to the game. But we went to stay with, I think it was his family the night before, so we had a place to stay. So we went past Pittsburgh and went into Ohio.
Yep.
And you say that and it makes me think back of that because you're absolutely right. It seems like the Steelers just they keep continuing to move over.
Yeah. Well, the main thing that everybody's connected by is that they're all Buckeyes fans. So that's one thing I can at least hold on to is being a Buckeyes fan.
Okay. So being an Ohio guy, how do you get into racing? Because I don't think of Ohio as being like a hotbed for motorsports. So what are your earliest memories?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not a hotbed for, I would say, NASCAR traditional, oval track racing, but it's huge, and I mean absolutely huge in drag racing. You have Summit Racing was 30 minutes from me. Jegs was like 2 hours from me. So you had, all kinds of NHRA activity around us. We had all kinds of dirt track stuff too. And, for me, where I got the bug, I guess you'd say, is I would go when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Most of my family was, on my dad's side, was in Michigan, in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. So my dad, he grew up there, and then he raced street stocks between like 17 and 19, somewhere in there, but just for fun, like nothing crazy. Like he and 3 other guys would go drive and share the car. But one of the guys that he went to high school with and he drove the car with back then, they decided in 2001 to get a dirt late model together, and my dad would be the main sponsor of it, sponsor the motor, and the guy would, Dave Hilliker, he would go and drive it. So when I was little, he became my idol and kind of like my hero, and we'd go up there 5-6 times a year and go watch them around Mount Pleasant Speedway, Merritt Speedway, all the treks, kind of around the MIS circle, if you will. So, man, I remember going there all the time. And it was the most fun thing when you're a kid because it's just so different. And that was the height of NASCAR, so everybody was huge into that at the short track scene. And the guy we were with, they used to run, they call them outlaw dirt late models. So they put this, you picture a normal dirt late model, you take the top of the cockpit off, the sheet metal there, and then on the left side they put about an 8-foot tall thing of plexiglass, and it would go from all the way there to the back of the car, and they'd have window braces that go up to it. So almost turned a dirt late model into a sprint car. And it was amazing because a quarter-mile track, they'd run wide open around it in a late model.
Wow.
And so Dave Hilliker, the guy I grew up watching, he became known as the King of the Wing because those cars, they had a casino up there that sponsored like a big series in there, and he'd win almost every single race up there. So I remember one race he won the race and the track championship, and he gave me the race flag, and I kept that forever. But I kind of knew then, I was like, all right, I want to start getting into racing.
So that's how you got the bug, so to speak.
Yeah. So at the same time,
it really wasn't a NASCAR thing at first.
No, it wasn't. It was definitely dirt tracks, and then at the same time, I guess I started watching NASCAR with my dad on Sunday, and that was Jeff Gordon had just gotten to the Flame car, and of course I'm a little kid, so I'm like, oh, Flames, that's cool. Yep. So I started liking him, and then 03 was my first NASCAR race. That was at Homestead. So I went to Homestead every single year until 2013. In 2014 I raced there for the first time. So I've been to Homestead just about every year since they repaved the track, which is kind of cool. But then I kept pushing my mom to let me do this, and of course that was a big fight and a losing fight. And I kept on doing research, and I started when I was about 9 doing research about stuff, just how to get into racing. And I finally found like a Bandolero car, a Legend car, and a go-kart deal. And there's a track called the Barberton Speedway about 30 minutes from us. And they had an open trial day. Like, you'd come there and try out a go-kart and just see if you liked it or not, which was really cool because they didn't have many programs like that I could find in any other forms of racing. So I went there and did it and loved it. And the guy's like, okay, that was really, really good. Like, you need to look into doing this. And, I'm still 11 years old. So I'm like, okay, how can I go racing? I remember we went to Cedar Point for my birthday, and my birthday present that year was a letter, and it said, we're getting you a go-kart. And I was, freaking out. So, it kind of started from there, and I raced regionally around Ohio and Michigan, Pennsylvania, ran like the whole Great Lakes region, and eventually nationals, and that eventually led to late model racing and kind of took it from there.
You mentioned Homestead and going there, what was it, every year since 2003. What was it like? Did it hit you at the time, the first time you got to race at Homestead, kind of how cool that was? Like, it was almost, that sounds like it was a real kind of full circle moment for you. Did you realize that at the time?
Yeah, it was, I would say my strongest one, honestly, was when I did my first truck race at Martinsville, because, like the Homestead thing, that was really, really neat. But the first year I ran it was right after I ran my first race at Martinsville, and I did a lot of late model racing with BJ McLeod down in Florida. He was my mentor, and I did a driving school with him, and then ever since then he just kind of took me under his wing, and I just kind of became his student, just learning as much as I could from him. And we put together a truck to go down there, and it was just an effort to go get laps and see what we could do. And ended up running 5th on the last lap until somebody came 3 wide and hit us, and ended up finishing 8th that race. But Martinsville was always my favorite track as a kid, so getting to race there was like incredible. But then that kind of set it off for like that full circle moment, because I went to Martinsville when I was a little kid, and I remember watching Jeff Gordon go win a race there, and that was awesome. And so when I did that, like, that was such an amazing day, that to where when I got to Homestead, our truck was still, it was pretty much a short track truck. Like, it wasn't, it was just to get experience and get my credentials to be able to do it the next year. But I would say the last 2 years in the Xfinity Series racing there was probably more of that moment for me at Homestead. But every time I go there, it's special because it's always bringing back memories. I can go and point out right where I saw it and watch races. I can remember where I sat watching Kurt Busch come down where he lost his tire coming onto pit road and everything, because we sat right in front of it. And I mean, just some of the most amazing races I remember watching as a kid, and remembering where I sat too.
Yeah, that track has developed so nicely over the years.
It's so cool.
The racing is just tremendous. So why was Homestead the track that you went to every year? Were there other races you guys went to?
Because it's freaking cold and clean.
I was gonna say, instead of going to like Michigan or something.
Yeah.
How did Homestead become the tradition? I guess.
Well, because in Ohio in November you get really sick and tired of the cold, and Miami sounds pretty good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, we tried it mainly because of that reason first, and then we went to a few different tracks, but we'd always try to do maybe like a double up year. We went to Phoenix one year, we went to Texas, Martinsville, and Pocono, I think.
So a little bit of everywhere. But
yeah, but we'd always end up going back to Homestead. That was always the favorite for
tradition.
Yeah, but after we saw it the first couple of years, once it started to get past the new pavement, part of its life, it became the best racetrack to watch in the grandstands. I mean, I think that track is by far the best track to watch from the stands. I don't think TV does it justice there, but when you watch in the stands, it's like a big dirt track, like just slide jobs going on everywhere, the riding the wall. It's just, for me, that's the best place to watch a race.
Yeah. So Jeff Gordon with the Flames car, of course, was something, and I've heard that many times. That that really grabs eyeballs for whether it's kids or young adults. Were you a collector once you really started getting into NASCAR? Do you remember some of the things that?
Oh yeah.
Whether it was memorabilia or die-cast.
It was die-cast for me. I still have my room is so funny when I go back home because like it didn't change from when I was in like middle school really. So whatever I had, I just kind of had.
Yeah.
And then they moved my room once, and like they just put all the die-cast cars back in there. And I was like, well, that's. Like, I didn't know what to do with it, so it's kept in there. It's really cool, some of the stuff I have. But, yeah, so I just got a bunch of old die-casts and stuff, which when I was little, I was always collecting some sort of a Jeff Gordon or cool die-cast car I could find, all that stuff. But, yeah, it was definitely always die-cast more than anything else.
Yeah. So die-cast over, T-shirts and
I didn't care about that much.
I mean, because die-cast, like, they're so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can either, like, sit them there and stare at them, or, you can play with, like... I don't know what it is, but even when I was a kid, I was the same way. Like the T-shirts were cool, and the hero cards are cool, and I would hang up magazines or whatever. But there was just always something about having a race car.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I guess it's like if you get a full-size baseball replica helmet or a football helmet or something like that, that's a lot cooler. I mean, jerseys are cool too, but that's a lot cooler than a trading card.
Yeah.
I mean, trading cards are cool, but it's not as tangible. I mean, it is still tangible.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Like
there's something different.
A helmet
about it.
or a race car.
It's more unique.
Yeah, it kind of connects you even more to that sport.
Mm-hmm.
So your family, for all intents and purposes, was not a racing family.
No.
I believe doing some research, you had said in one interview that your family's more of a business family than a racing family.
That's for sure.
Kind of just gives some insight into. I know you have a brother and a sister. Kind of how. Like you said, you watched racing with your dad, but for the most part, you weren't a racing family. So what's the dynamic life like in the Tifft household? I guess?
Well, I guess you bring up the business part. That was mainly my mom, and it brought in my dad too. But my mom has a really interesting story. So she had graduated college, and she decided to go into the Peace Corps, and they sent her to Togo, Africa. And when you're in the Peace Corps, you're supposed to go for 2 years. And she made it through 9 months, and she got malaria 3 times. So the last time she almost died, so she had to come back to the States. And malaria is not a fun thing to get no matter what, but especially getting it 3 times in less than a year is crazy. So she was living in D.C., and my dad was living down there too, and she was working in the Smithsonian, and she came back and was like, there's got to be some way I can help third world countries develop some sort of assistance for these infectious diseases. So she started a company with my dad after they met called Clinical Research Management, and they ran it for 25 years, 26 years, and they actually just sold it too. And so that was I might be their firstborn, but that was their first child for sure. So just growing up, watching them turn it into, a business, a startup, from them being just the two of them in my bedroom to what they were able to do at the end of the company, which was they brought like blood mobiles from Virginia and sent them to Africa, and basically were able to treat and vaccinate hundreds of different villages around Africa and make such a huge impact. And we're able to get those countries, the ones you're hearing that were finally cleared of all the traces of Ebola, that was them going to do the groundwork and coming up with the help of the clearance and the research of the vaccines through the FDA. And that was all funded by the Bill Gates Foundation. So she actually got to go and meet Bill Gates, which is really cool. So that was that's what I grew up with, and which I don't know if I got tired of it or what it was, but I was like, okay, I got to do something that's totally the opposite, which is racing. But no, so I mean that was what I was raised around. Mm-hmm. So I always knew the medical world, and then of course it's been well documented my brain tumor experience and everything. So I wish I didn't have so many ties to the medical world and the business world with that, but it's interesting, and I definitely think it shaped a huge part of who I am. And nowadays we're so business driven in NASCAR that you have to I feel like we've moved so much to being beyond a spokesperson for a brand, but really driving, why a brand should be in NASCAR, why it makes sense for somebody to spend so much money on a race car. And there's got to be a return on that. And I feel like for the next generation of drivers, it's not just creating our own brands, which I'm trying to get better at, but understanding why and how you can help a brand that's investing in racing.
So with that said, it sounds like you're very conscious of, like you said, your brand and things how you can connect business in the racing world. Besides your brand, I mean, are you involved with, sponsors and things like how do you kind of merge the two? Because it seems like, again, you have a very good understanding of the business world and wanting to apply that to helping your racing career. Mm-hmm. How do you go about doing that?
I mean, I guess the challenge for me is, sitting here, again, 2018 Season 2 in the Xfinity Series, I learned a lot of how other guys did a really good job of building their brands, and, mine is very, very small in comparison to some, and I need to grow that a lot and kind of figure out where I want to set myself apart and be my own unique self to be able to just create a wider net of having people connect with who I am. So that's a big one for me, but I guess the biggest thing is, like I said, you have to be able to connect with sponsors. So, I've been trying to, now that I moved to RCR, work a lot with the business development team and chasing down sponsors and trying to come up with strategic partnerships and ideas with sponsors to keep them interested and engaged. And, ultimately, that job never really stops, and we're searching for stuff all the time. But you want to keep on building to where you're creating meaningful relationships that can develop and grow through the years, that they don't want to say, hey, either we're going to go to that driver or drop out of racing. You want to keep them involved, having fun, and seeing dollars come back to them.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you feel like you have some responsibility as well in making sure that the sponsors are, that you're involved with,
absolutely.
Sponsor talks and keeping them happy, so to speak, and really kind of connecting with who your partners are going to be.
Well, and we had the NASCAR Younger Drivers Seminar a couple weeks ago, and I thought one of the coolest things for me to hear, we had Dale Jr. come and be a keynote speaker there. I thought one of the coolest things that I heard from him was that I asked a question to him, what's the best way to keep a brand loyal to you and loyal to racing? And he said what he does is he tries to call up the CEO or the top decision makers and just check in with them, see how their day is going, what's up with them, how their family is doing, see how the racing program can be better between the two of them. But, that first part of it I thought was really important, and just connecting with those people that, at the end of the day, they're paying for what we do, and that's writing my paycheck, that's helping write the paychecks of the employees and the team here. That's huge. That's so many families that are involved. And if I'm sitting here and I don't make that phone call and I out myself out of a job and all the crew out of a job, that's stupid. If I could just go and make a connection and mm-hmm. Go care about somebody that's letting me live my dream. Mm-hmm. I think that's the days of people throwing away money at racing are gone, and you got to make it meaningful.
What would you say your brand is? You feel like that's something you want to work at. What are the things that you're trying to do with that?
I think for me, the biggest thing is that, I live in Charlotte, obviously, but I'm definitely a hometown Cleveland guy. Mm-hmm. That's me through and through. I think that's a bit of a personality trait too, being from that area. Just, it's not the South, it's not California or anything. Like Cleveland is sometimes it's a running joke, like it really is, but you see some of the largest companies come out of Cleveland and some of the most successful people come out of that area. And I think it's, we have so many connections to that area in our sport too that people don't really realize at all. But, I think being from there and having a connection to Northeast Ohio is really big for me. Being able to eventually create it to where I'm a household name there and have that as the NASCAR driver for that area is really big for me. Beyond that, I'm obviously very involved with the brain tumor world and pushing for advocacy and for change, and I'm really interested to see what I can do with that in the future. We have another walk in May coming up to where we're doing the Charlotte Brain Tumor Walk. It's a 5K, and or I guess it's not a walk, it's However, if you want to walk or run, you can do either one of them. But last year we raised $135,000 for brain tumor research, and they were able to do that at just about every one of their events. So not only that, but in May I'm also going to Washington, D.C., and I did that last year too, where I was actually going to congressmen and women lobbying for research and awareness funds to be put towards brain tumors research. So that's a big part of me too. But I guess at the end of it, that stuff is all great, but I'm a normal guy at the same time. Like, I like to enjoy my life. I have a great girlfriend and a dog, and we like to go travel around Charlotte and try different foods, and that's all the big picture stuff. But the same thing, I'm still a very grounded, normal person, and it was always amazing to me to see when I grew up in racing the huge personalities and stuff. But at the end of the day, you're just normal people, so I always want to be the guy that's connecting with fans and that's not, turning away autographs. That's one thing you'll always see from me at the track is I'll always try to sign autographs for somebody or meet with some kid that's around the back of the trailer. When I was, like you said, I did not come from a racing family, but I was a fan. Mm-hmm. So if I can make a fan's day and not even convert them to a Matt Tifft fan, but be a NASCAR fan because of an experience I gave them, that's awesome. Again,
going back to, you were in that position, mm-hmm. You can kind of relate to what they may be thinking or feeling and experiencing.
Yeah, I was a fan, so why not make their experience better?
Exactly. Going back to your family, what do they think of this crew? How you've ended up, and do they get to come to the races a lot, and how does that all work? What do they think of this career?
It's different. Yeah, my dad, he has been to every single race but one since I've started racing. So he has an amazing attendance record, and he flies from Cleveland Commercial to every race weekend. So he's racked up a lot of miles.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he has a lot of frequent flyer points for United. Yeah.
Wow.
But he's always been super supportive. Obviously, he was the one who got me into it, so it's his fault. My mom, it took her a while to get on the train, so to speak. She's like I said, she's a businesswoman, so when I first got into it, I actually had to write a proposal of why I should do racing.
That might be the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it goes beyond that. My first cell phone, I had to write her a 2-page proposal of why I should have a cell phone. So yeah, we eventually got past that. This is the
greatest. I think this has officially become one of the greatest interviews I've ever done.
I don't know what the deal was, but yeah, of course it got to my brother and sister. I was like, yeah, who cares? You do whatever you want. But that's my opinion anyways. I'm sure she'd...
The firstborn always has to go through a little bit more. Yeah. I feel like I can attest to that as well.
Okay, you're a firstborn too?
Yes.
Okay, yep, there you go. You know how it is.
Yeah, we have to go through the trials and tribulations, and then after that...
Yeah, so my mom's gotten it. I think now that she's sold her company and she's still involved with other companies, but she's starting to understand the meaningfulness of the sponsorship side of things. So I think she's really excited to be involved on that side of it, on her own research and prospecting of it in the area. And because of what she did with her company, she's made a lot of contacts in the Cleveland area. So we're always trying to work avenues in there. But, my brother, he was in racing for a little bit when he was younger. He did a little bit of go-kart racing, but he is so totally the opposite of me in a good way. Like, we get on a lot better now than we did before, because we used to just butt heads a lot, because I was always the business guy and he's incredibly smart, and he's like super engineer minded, and that's the part that I never fully got. So like, he'd be a perfect crew chief, or if he wanted to go design something, he's the type of guy to tear down something, build it all together and make it better than it was before. And so I've always admired that about him, and it's frustrated me too, because I'm like, how are you so smart?
Right.
And I'm just sitting here like, God, I feel stupid around you sometimes, which, yeah, I guess the only way I'll get to admit that to him is if he listens to this podcast. So, but then my sister, she's, let's see, she'll be, how old is she now? She'll be turning 16 this year. That's crazy. But she's been into horses, and that's, those things just terrify me. So she got a horse 5-6 years ago, and I was still living at home. And my mom said, I've been thinking about building a barn at our house. And in Hinckley, Ohio, there's lots of barns and farmland. Like, we live in the middle of nowhere pretty much. So that's not unheard of at all. But she's like, she calls me Matthew. So Matthew, you need to go get and take horse lessons. I'm like, why would I take horse lessons? I drive race cars.
Yeah.
And she's like, you have to take horse lessons if we're going to have a horse. It's like, when in the world did this become my decision to have a horse? Like, I would not have a horse. This is not my deal. And she's like, well, you need to learn how to muck the stalls, how to go clean the horse. I'm like, I don't care. Like, sorry, they're pretty, but they're scary.
From your sister's thing to somehow you get wrapped up.
Oh yeah. I think it's because she didn't want to scoop the stalls. So yeah, I did 6 horse lessons, and my 6th one we went on a trail ride.
You made it 5 more than I would have.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I think I made it to 5. And we got to a creek, and
oh boy,
my horse got to it. His name was Sparky, and Sparky was supposed to be a good horse. As in like an easy horse to ride. So Sparky backs up without my command about 10 feet, and he leaps like, I don't even know how high in the air, and jumps the thing and lands. And that just scared the absolute living you-know-what out of me.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I would have been done. I would have been like, nope, I'm walking back.
Yeah. So that was it, and I told my mom I'm never riding a horse again, and I haven't. So now they have a horse and a couple people come and board inside there, and my sister's trying to train them, and so she like develops and trains the horses, and then she's eventually trying to be on like the junior Olympics team for horses, which is really cool. But that's the one world I found out that's more screwed up than racing.
That's funny. So one last thing on the business aspect. Are you still going to school for that? I know at one point you were, and then you took some time off. Where are you with that? You were going to UNC.
I was, yeah. So I guess backtracking on that, I knew that racing in school was going to be tough from the beginning. So when I was in high school, I took a lot of college classes just to try to get ahead. So when I got to UNCC, I was about a semester or so ahead. I wish I would have done more, but so I did it full time for a couple of years. And then in 2016, that's when the whole brain surgery thing happened. And I at that time was planning on coming back and doing part-time courses and racing at the same time. I think when that kind of happened, there's so much stuff going on because I was trying so hard to fight to be back in a race car that it just exhausted me on anything else I did. So my doctor said that I needed to just kind of focus on one, which was the perfect excuse to get my mom off my back for that. But yeah, I mean, it was time to put my focus into it, and I would say, I'm still so much more involved in the business world than I ever was back then. So I feel like I'm still always in school learning from these guys. Like, that's the neat thing about RCR is that these guys are so good at what they do, and they've all come from different sports agencies and any kind of business and marketing platform. They've seen it, they've done it. So I'm learning a ton, and I feel like I'm learning more every time I go into a boardroom or get on a conference call with them. So that's really neat. But I'll say my biggest regret I have about my whole racing career is when I was at KBM a couple years ago. I was doing full-time school and I had a part-time scheduled at KBM, and I completely overloaded myself. And I don't think I gave myself a fair shot. Like, I had a fair shot to do very well at KBM. And I don't think I reached my potential because I was so stretched between going to school full-time and racing. And I'd say I hurt my confidence a lot when I did that, and it took a long time to get that back. And I feel like now I'm kind of at a place where I've just moved myself into a new camp where none of that follows me now. I feel like I've learned so much more to where moving to RCR and to Chevrolet, I'm just in this totally new place where I feel like this is the start of my career in a way, which is a weird way to say that, but I feel like I guess a better way to say it is it's a new chapter of it.
Well, I was going to say, do you feel like since you've been able to kind of, put aside the school and things like that and the work and homework and everything that goes with that, and you've been able to, like you said, kind of refocus yourself, do you feel like that's made you, in a way, do you feel like a better driver now, or do you feel like you're recommitted, or...
Yeah, I would say both of those things. And beyond the school stuff, I'd say the brain tumor stuff too. I mean, yeah, I was cleared to drive and there was no medical issues at all. But when you go through something like that, it takes a while to get that out of your head. And I feel like it took until my 1 year mark, which was Daytona of last year, to completely get that cleared out to where I didn't think about that anymore. It wasn't that I felt anything. It wasn't that I just would maybe second guess myself sometimes. And it just took me a while to get past that. And they say that you go from 0 to 90% in 6 months, but that last 10% is the hardest thing to get back, and it takes about that rest of the 6 months. So that was the turning point for me, is when we hit the mid part of the season last year, as far as feeling good. And then I feel like at the end of the season, I was able to change my health as far as what I was eating, how I was training and all that, to where today I feel like I'm much mentally and physically stronger and just way more ready to take on what I need to do.
So let's talk a little bit of racing before we wrap this up. So Richard Childress Racing, Chevrolet, if my math is correct and my research is correct, this year will be the first time you've been in anything that's not, in a few years, that is not a Toyota. So coming into a Chevrolet, of course a new team, but from the Chevy aspect, do you expect any kind of adjustment period, maybe getting up to speed the first couple weeks? I mean, it's also got to be a little bit of a fun challenge as well, getting to work with a new manufacturer. Yeah,
well, I guess I always ran Chevy stuff when I was coming up through late models, and when I raced for Ken Schrader, that was obviously a Chevrolet team, so or was at the time anyways. So I had actually worked with some of the guys in there, but at the ARCA level, that doesn't really matter too much with the manufacturer. So yeah, it's I think adjusting to a new team is a lot bigger than the actual manufacturer component of it. The good thing is we have a lot of tools with the GM simulator to be able to go in and work together, with Randall Burnett, my crew chief, and Byron, the race engineer, and myself, to get our chemistry together and kind of work that out before the season starts or in between the first few races. And yeah, the first couple races are interesting because you're learning each other's lingo, you're learning what strategies work, what I like, what they like for communication. I have a new spotter with Billy O this year. So there's a lot of new communication pieces that last year I felt like we kind of stumbled getting out of the gate with. And I think knowing like where we need to have checkup meetings and like just kind of points to reevaluate things. We'll probably have to do it every couple weeks the first part of the season just to say, hey, how's this working? Is this not working? What can I do better? But the self-evaluation piece of it will be big, and I think that part of it is way more important nowadays than the manufacturers, because with the Hawkeye system and everything's so close. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome to be saying that I'm driving a Chevrolet, and I've always been a big fan of them. So I think every personal car that I've bought has always been a Chevy. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah. Do you like challenges, Matt? Like just whether it's different racetracks or the competition? I mean, it seems like there's no lacking challenges in this sport.
That's for sure.
Are you somebody, though, that likes that?
Absolutely.
Do you like being able to go out there, whether it's challenging yourself or, again, going back to the competition and the racetracks? Or, yes, it's the same set of racetracks, but everything's constant. Like, it changes all the time, whether it's weather or the cars or tires, things like that. Do you get a kick out of, I guess, all the variables in this sport?
Yeah, I mean, you always have to be adapting to it, and that's something I learned a lot last year was when I don't like to dwell on the past too much, but when I drove the cars in 2016 and 2017, the cars at JGR in 2016 were so dominant with that aero package. When we switched to 2017, it took a while for me to adapt and learn how to adapt, but I feel like I almost had to go through a crash course of, okay, stupid, like, let's figure this out because it's not going very well. So I think I learned how to adapt a lot more because of my, I guess that's why they say, it was almost like a mistake, but I learned from that because I probably didn't prepare myself enough to expect what was going to happen. So yeah, I definitely feel like I'm ready to face any challenge now, and this sport is just, like you said, full of challenges and changes, and with the stages last year, I know I got to completely change my approach to them this year, and Randall and I were literally just talking about that before I came up here. So it's a lot to take on, but I mean, it's all, I'm not scared about it anymore. Like, that's the biggest thing, is I'm ready to take on those challenges.
What made you scared? Like, was it just
the unknown? Yeah, the newness and the unknown of what it was going to be. I just didn't know,
Yeah. I think, again, going back to what you mentioned earlier, just the, now you've been here for a while.
Just being there.
Yeah.
I mean, not even for a while, but just knowing different situations and knowing how to change your approach to things as the environment changes around you. That's a big deal in racing. It's a big deal in life too, but I feel like I'm a lot more mature in that aspect.
So I've asked this to a few younger drivers, and I'm going to throw it your way too, just because it's something that fascinates me personally.
Oh boy.
Well, no. So you as a younger driver, we always hear, guys can, will lean on your teammates or study data, things like that. But you as a younger driver, how do you like to learn? What are the ways that you try to better yourself and better your team? Is it through data? Is it through driver reports? Is it talking to your teammates? What is the way that you, Matt Tifft, think that you are able to make yourself better?
I think for me, when I was in go-karts, I definitely learned that I was very data-driven. Seeing telemetry and how I compared to other drivers was big. Now in the Xfinity Series, we're really handicapped with that because we have a lot of restrictions on us that say that we're not allowed to have that. So you got to kind of take the data that you can pull from the simulator, data that you can pull from just watching like different lap trackers or position trackers, all that kind of stuff is the best stuff you can look at with it. But because we are restricted compared to the Cup Series on data, the best thing that I can do for myself is have that open line of communication and see how I can improve. And that's, to me, the critiquing of that, because of the Xfinity Series and how it is with those rules on data, that will help me excel more. And that, I think, was the biggest key of last year. Is once we got our communication together and had that open line, I feel like I excelled a lot more. And when I was more honest with myself, too. I mean, you got to do it at some point. Just self-evaluate and see where you're at. But I think that's a big deal to take in what other people are saying in around you. And this year, having Hemrick here as a teammate, I mean, he's an absolutely awesome driver. I've grown up around him. I've seen him do a lot of late model racing. Like, he is so knowledgeable about these cars, and he is so just studied of the whole sport of NASCAR. And being able to lean on him will be really, really cool to do as a teammate. We did as competitors last year a little bit, but being able to do that this year as a teammate will be really beneficial, not only for me, but I think for the whole Xfinity program at RCR.
So speaking of the Xfinity program, I made a mistake yesterday on Super Bowl Sunday of asking people to pay attention to something other than football by seeing if anybody had any questions. But the one that I did get that I may have even asked as well, that I thought was a good one, was what your thoughts were on NASCAR continues to limit the cup drivers in the Xfinity program, and obviously here at RCR that affects you guys as well when it comes to Austin and Ty. Do you have a feeling one way or another about how much you get to race the cup guys? And I guess my question, or my follow-up question to that would be, are you somebody that likes the fact that you can race the cup guys? We always hear whether it's younger drivers, again, talk about, that's how they learn. So, again, the first part of it, do you care one way or another about what the limit is? And, how do you feel just in general racing the Cup guys?
Well, I certainly don't think that they should limit anymore. I think it's at a tipping point of if you go any more with it, it hurts the sponsors from participating in the Xfinity Series. I understand why they do it and why they wanted to adapt to help the fans say that they're listening. But yeah, for a younger driver, we were, again, I was just sitting in my crew chief's office and we were watching Kevin Harvick around Atlanta. If Kevin Harvick's not in that race, how do you learn from one of the greatest to Atlanta Motor Speedway to learn what he does? Those experiences of being around those guys have, that. It's so, how do I put it? It's so unique that we get the chance to race against our sport's top competitors. If you're in college football and you are a wide receiver, if you can play with Ben Roethlisberger, heck yeah, you want to do it. You want to be able to race and compete against those guys in the Xfinity Series. And like I said, I completely understand why they did the limiting, but I don't think it should go any further. But, I enjoy it, and I feel like I have learned a lot more because if you want to make that next step, you have to be able to compete with them at the Xfinity Series level. And when you make the next jump, there's no rule, they're not going to limit them at the Cup Series. You're coming into the Cup Series, so you better figure it out. So I think it's kind of a proving grounds to show you belong. And look at what William Byron did. He showed he absolutely belonged in the Cup Series, and he's driving the 24 car this year. That's just how it goes.
So I'm going to end with kind of a broad question, in a sense. We keep talking about and we keep touching on the fact that, new home this year, of course, with RCR driving the number 2. What are you most looking forward to? It's a very broad question, but I want to just throw that into your hands of, again, another year in the Xfinity Series, new team. It seems like you mentioned, very family-like feeling here, getting settled in. So what are you most looking forward to this year?
I guess in a broad answer, everything. Like I've had so much fun since I've gotten here. It's the most fun that I've had since I was at Schrader's ARCA program, and I'd say the most fun I've had since I've been in a national touring series. So I'm really enjoying it. There's not one particular thing. I'm going to get into the racetrack, but I've enjoyed the off the track stuff more than I ever have. So it's very enjoyable for me this year, and it's really made me completely renew my love for racing, and I think that's awesome.
Well, Matt Tifft, congratulations on your first podcast.
Thank you.
I think it went well, but once again, if it sucked, you won't even know.
Exactly.
So we'll take it.
That's great.
Well, thank you, buddy. And Daytona's just around the corner.
It is, yeah. It came up quick.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it again, and you made it. It was nice and harmless, right?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
All right, so we'll have to keep doing it then.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
then you'll have something to, rate the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you, bud.